Welcome to the Happy Being Well podcast, where we talk about strategies and insights so you can live happy being well with your host, Rita Ferrugia. This podcast is presented by happybeingwell.com, your online store providing the best in all natural wellness products, such as natural essential oils, all natural bath products, all natural facial masks, all natural deodorants, irresistible leggings, crystals, including crystal home decor and kitchen items, herbal teas, natural sleep aids, and so much more natural wellness goodies at happybeingwell.com. Free shipping on any order within the USA at happybeingwell.com. Now enjoy the show.
For joining in. I'm super excited for today's podcast. We've got Garyjohnbishop, the best-selling New York Times best-selling author of Unf Yourself, which I'm sure everybody's read that book, have heard about that book. It was like infamous. So, but you have a new book. It's called Grow Up, Becoming the Parents Your Kids Deserve. And I'm really excited to really go into this topic with you. So talk to us. What made you write the book? What you going from learning how to unf yourself to now talking about being great parents?
Yeah, I think, people had been asking me, about writing a book about being a parent. And I wanted to tackle the subject, but I wanted to tackle the subject in a way that wasn't just like a laundry list of things you need to do as a parent, which, might make some kind of difference, but I don't think it actually transforms your relationship to being a parent. And whether we like it or not, the way that we parent, it's not entirely free. We're not free to parent. We're encumbered, we're burdened by whatever, right? And so in this book, I'm really into. I wanted to give people something that they could transform their relationship to parenting their children, and maybe get a little bit of a different perspective on it than one they had considered.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I can see why people would want to ask you. I mean, especially after reading that phenomenal book that you wrote. And I mean, in today we never want to repeat the patterns of our parents, right? And
right.
Why is it so important? You mentioned I believe in your book that why is it so important to forgive our parents and let it go?
Well, in the book, one of the first things I say to you is I'm not going to ask you to forgive them. And the reason why I'm not going to ask you to forgive them is because it's very difficult to forgive somebody as long as there's some kind of anchor of blame in there, right? Now, blame, whether we like it or not, is our anchor to the past. So anyone or anything you're blaming, it's something that's already been, okay? It's not something that's coming or something that's here. It's something that's already been and it's continuing here. And so you can't even get to forgiveness until you confront the really penetrative and toxic nature of what it is to blame and what it is to live with blame. And so I lay it out in the book. I really lay out the kind of the structure of how does blame work? What's it really about? Because you and I, we mostly relate to blame like it's very personal, and it's not. It's very human. But why? Why do we do it? So in the book, I lay it out for people to really see not only why they're doing it, but the damage and the impact that it's continuing to have. And that includes, by the way, some of the things that people might say, I'm done with that thing, I'm over that thing. In this book, you'll get a real insight into how much of that past of yours is still hanging in there.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And and it can show up in different ways.
Well,
and
you can't even see it half the time. I mean, I'll tell you, there's two ways that we parent, okay? There's only two ways. There's no other way. We parent the way we were parented, or the opposite. So that's it. There's two modes. Now, if you have children, what do you think your children are going to do? Well, they're going to parent the way they were parented, or the opposite. So if you do the opposite of what your parents did, and your children do the opposite of what you did, then you're back at square one again. Here we go. right? So I talk about this kind of notion of a generational chain in this book, and I kind of burst the bubble of that a little bit, because there's a little bit of arrogance about that these days. People say, I'm going to break the generational chain, like no generation has ever tried that before. Like many generations have tried to break that chain. Children of the 20s and the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, when they were growing up, when they were in their teens, they were breaking what they thought was the generational chain. But what actually happened was it persisted by its very nature, and it has to persist because of the way children respond to being parented. And I get into that in the book. I actually give you a little insight into where, if you have children, where they are right now in the kind of development stage of things, and which might give people a better kind of grasp of what they're kind of wrestling with. But also, you can't really have this conversation about parenting, or rather being a parent, until you deal with how you were parented, how you parent, and what it's like to be the child of you. So when you started digging into that, then people really started to see like how it all connects in ways maybe you hadn't thought of previously.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I really like the point, because I think we all have witnessed this where, whether it's our people that we know for a long time, we see them how they parent with their kids, that it's either the similar or the way they've been parented, or it's completely opposite.
Right.
What they parent, it's like, that is so true. Like, it's something that's a good point.
I'll give you a little example, because I've coached lots of people on this over the years, but I'll give you a little example of a fairly common one. People grow up and they feel as if their parents were unloving, right? Or they were cold, right? You'll hear that's very common. My father was cold. He never loved me. He never expressed his love for me. My mother was very cold. So then the opposite is, I'm never going to do that to my children. I'm going to love my children, right? Invariably, somewhere in there, that child or one of your children will grow up with the experience of being like, it's too much, right? It's like, whoa, this is too, oh my God. And so they'll push back on it, right? And so they'll come out of their childhood with, I was smothered. I'm never going to do that to my child. So they'll have their child, and their child might well grow up with the experience of, like, my father never really demonstrated, my mother never really demonstrated their love for me. So it's all this kind of like ping pong. It's like this little game where it goes back and forth, generation to generation. And I want people to get the absolute madness of it. Like, what are we doing? Like, we're basing everything that we're doing as a parent on what has already been, which in no way equips my child for what's to come. Like, it just doesn't equip them. So it's a transformational book in that regard. Really opens your eyes to the kind of, not only the struggle, but what it actually takes you to break out of that mold and create something unique and new for you. But the impact that'll have on your children too.
I love that. And that's the key right there, to break the mold, to really, do you think that's like a long process to break the mold? Because I think this is why we're constantly trying to.
Yeah. So that's a brilliant point, Rita, because one of the things that people talk about in transformation and making life change, people say, I'm a work in progress, or this is a work in progress, right? Okay, but I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in like realizations, things that snap you out of it. And so an example that I like to use for people is, they'll say, I've had these instances where I've coached people and they've kind of borne a resentment for maybe 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And then something happens to the person that they've been resenting, right? Maybe the person gets sick, like whatever. And for some of those people, when they find that out, that resentment, gone. Like gone. Like it disappears. They're like, I can't resent a person like that. Gone. They can't do it. They can't bring themselves to do it. So that's the stuff that fascinates me, is like, what happened in that moment that you went from like 20 years of resentment to I'm done. It's over. I can't do this. And so my aim in this book is to provide people with those little jarring moments. And, like all of my work, my work can be very confronting because I want to produce the kind of work that works. It's not just some book you read, but it actually works. Like you go in and you think and you join the dots and you have your own little realizations. And in that process, that's where the freedom is. And that's where the real, those realizations can be instantaneous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And they can move you. They can really move you to start really taking real action and commit to it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that, because I've done a lot of this kind of work over the years, just so much of this with people. And sometimes when people were maybe treated badly in their childhood or abused in their childhood, right? Because it's common. It's not uncommon. It is very common, okay? And some of it brutal, really harsh, right? And some of it you could barely even speak about, right? How are you supposed to wade your way through that? And this is one of the things that I talk about in this book. I say there's only two ways to handle that. You're either going to be, when you come out of that kind of past, you're either going to be the recovering victim, right? So you're kind of getting over it, and you're going to triumph, right? Or you're in some kind of internal self-blame, so you're kind of like the repentant sinner. I did something really bad then. That's the only two things you can come out of there with. But it brings you back to that other element, because those two things can only exist in a paradigm of blame. If you take the blame out, who's to blame, if you take that out, that kind of drive to blame myself, blame other people, blame the timing, blame the whatever. If you can't blame, then what? Well, how does it live on? And those are the moments that I want people to get, those realizations of not only the damage of blame, that actually you can do something about it, but what it's like for you really as a human being. If you've had that kind of troubled childhood and you're out to parent right now and you're struggling with that whole element, then you must address that real, the elephant in the room, which is called who's to blame for how this turned out, and the exhaustion of that and the overwhelm of living life that way and how it burns you out. And once you start to kind of stack it all up, I think that's a big thing for people when they see those things might be over, but the damage is still being done. And when you confront your blame and who's been to blame, you will see a pathway out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I totally agree. I think personal development work, I think it's probably part of the challenge is that it's invisible.
Yeah.
It's it really takes to really self-reflect and talk to a person like yourself, read a book that you wrote to start to learn and gain the insights and knowledge to learn what's the invisible part, because it's invisible, because we go through life, especially in our society, and we don't even think. A lot of people are self-sabotaging. They don't even know that they're doing it because it's in overt ways. And then
so that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry. Well, that was a big. That's probably the hardest thing. It's does a goldfish know it's in water? It's just in there, goldfishing away, right? It doesn't know water, and so, what you believe to be true as a human being, what you've come to believe to be true, is unquestioned. It's unquestioned. It's that's the water you're swimming in, right? If you deal with upset in your life, there's only one way you know how to deal with upset. If you deal with criticism, there's only one way you know how to deal with it. So you're swimming in a pool of you, but it doesn't feel like that. It feels like I'm wrestling with life. I'm dealing with life. That's what it feels like. It feels like, oh no, I'm dealing with a crappy job, or I'm dealing with a family situation. I'm dealing with that. I'm trying to make these things work, and my finances, and my body, and my family, and it just feels like I'm dealing with what's going on around me. I don't realize that what I'm actually dealing with is myself, is me dealing with these things. That's what I'm dealing with. My struggles in life are the things that I'm struggling with about myself, about the things I'm facing in life. So I'm always dealing with myself. So again, people might look at the bank balance. That's not me. People might look at the job and say, that's not me. That's my job. No, that's you doing your job. That's you dealing with your finances. That's you being a parent. And even though you might think, or you're trying to give it your best shot, you're doing your best, it's all coming from somewhere. It's all got a source. And that's a lot of what this book gets into, is like, what's at the source of the way that you're engaging with this thing in your life?
That being said, and that's excellent. Yeah, we have to tap into that source, and we need those insights. We need that intel by reading your book and working with like a person like yourself. Now, that being said, what has shaped your childhood, or you as a child and you as a young adult, that you've carried over as an adult today? And
yeah. Well, I can tell you a really destructive thing that I took out of my childhood that on the surface seemed like a major advantage for me. Okay, so, I'm originally, I've got, as you might have gathered, I've got a little bit of an accent. Here I've got two accents. So I'm originally from Scotland, but I've lived in the United States for, almost 30 years now, even though I'm with you from a hotel room in London, which is why we have these really charming curtains behind me. But out of that, and I'm from Glasgow, Scotland. I'm from a very kind of blue collar, you call it for what it is kind of place. And, it had this reputation when I was a child anyway, and in some ways continues. Very, very tough kind of upbringing. And, I had my own little traumas all the way through that, like people have in their childhood. But what I came out with was this drive, like hardworking, okay? And so, I just, and very independent, very hardworking, was very driven. And it wasn't until I was getting on in my 30s that I was going where I had pointed myself, but it was some point in my 30s I started to get, but what's that? Like, why did I point myself here? But the big thing that I noticed was how unfulfilling it was. And the more that I examined and got into and started to do personal development work on myself, I saw that hardworking thing was creating absolute chaos in my marriage. So I'd become this single-minded, isolationist, driven and very, very hard to love. Like, very hard man to love. It was not easy to connect with. And it wasn't like I wasn't happy or funny or engaging or social. I wasn't like locked up in a room somewhere. I had friends. We had friends. But all my mind was on just produce. And I was headed for, a life of being alone. That's where this was going to go. So in doing this kind of work, this similar kind of work, I really realized that it had been a long time since I'd ever loved another person. Like, actually loved them, right? Expressed my love. And so that's another thing that I want people to get. It's not only examining all the things that maybe you already know about the impact of your childhood and what you went through back there and how it influences the way you are as an adult or a parent. I want to shine a light on, here's what you're not seeing now. Here's what you're missing. Because as you said, it is very challenging to see. It's easy to see somebody else, It's very challenging to see yourself because the thing you're looking for is doing the looking. So you're trying to look at this thing, but it's the thing itself that's doing all the looking. So that's why sometimes people read books like mine or any kind of personal growth book, and they're like, yeah, it doesn't apply to me. There's no inquiry. I say this every time I bring out another book. I say this: the value of my books is not in the words. The value of the books is in the thinking and the spaces between the words. Like when you think and you join dots for yourself, you will have your own ahas. You don't need me for that. You just need me to kind of point you in a direction and ask you some questions. And there's a treasure trove.
I love that. That was brilliantly said and articulate to, yeah, that's the process of reading something and learning something. It's art, right? It's a part of art. It's like, it depends, you interpret it the way you interpret it based on your personal filter, your knowledge, your experiences, and your ability to be self-aware. So, you know, I think self-awareness is probably a big part of the equation, is like really developing, learning how to be self-aware. I think you have to learn how to be self-aware. I think it's something that you have to like learn as a skill, because we were never taught it. We're just taught do.
Right. So I think self-awareness, though, see, sometimes what you want to make sure you're not left with is a category or a title of whatever you're aware of. If whatever you're aware of isn't making a difference for you, if it doesn't elevate your experience of yourself, if you don't experience more power or more freedom or more sense of satisfaction, if you're not getting that out of what you're aware of, that's not awareness, that's knowledge. You know something about yourself. You haven't quite cracked the nut yet for it to go back, and for you to really, like, for it to completely change how you see yourself and see somebody else. That's awareness. That's when you're like, oh my gosh, like, so you'll meet people all the time, Rita, who'll tell you lots about themselves and why they are, but it's not making a difference. It's not actually getting them, you know, through the glass ceiling, if you like. They're not breaking through. It's like they're still in there, rammed full of knowledge, but not breaking through. And that's why sometimes the approach I take, it can be a little confrontational, you know, like I'll poke you. And I've had this many times, people saying, you know, at first your book annoyed me, like I was just annoyed. And I'm like, well, good, because that means something stirring over there, right? Or even if sometimes people say, yeah, I was checked, I was bored by your book. And I'm like, yeah, that's what your brain will do. You know, when you start to get into it, your brain's like, okay, let's get out of this. So I say to people, you know, you gotta, it's intervening with yourself and the experience of doing the work, not just farming the information out of it. You can get a lot, by the way, of not only my book, but books of my kind. You'll learn a lot about yourself if you just notice how you're reacting as you're reading it.
So that's a really good point. So, you know, yeah, we all know people who know about themselves. Now everyone seems to know about their triggers because it's such a, you know, buzz term now. But it seems like there's other steps involved in order to really change.
Right. I mean, I'll give you a little example of triggers, right? This is kind of how it works in relationships now. So I might have a trigger. And my trigger might be the way you talk to me, okay? So I don't like the way you talk to me. It sounds disrespectful. That's my trigger. Okay, but that's not enough. And it's not even close to enough, right? You've just maybe seen the tip of the iceberg. So you come to somebody like me, I'm like, well, when did that start? And with whom? And explain to me, like, the frequency with which that happens. Explain to me, when you're hooked like that, what do you typically do? And in that process and all of that, you start to see, like, oh my gosh, like, this isn't just a trigger. This is a method. This is a methodology for me. And often, by the way, your triggers are related to domination and control, right? So even though you might feel really negative, you might not be angry, you might be, like, you know, deflated. It's all, if you root it all the way back, so a way to have life be the same and familiar, even when it's terrible, right? I talked about that in my second book, about, you know, you talked a lot about the self-sabotage. When you get any self-sabotage, it's not pointless. It's a design to produce a certain kind of familiar result. Even though you might not like living with that result, what keeps you coming back is the familiarity of the result, right? It's like you have to keep fighting the same battle over and over and over. And you can change the people around you. You'll find a way back there. And that sort of stuff, again, it's like the stuff that just fascinates me about us, you know, as human beings. It's like we have to have a fight. There has to be something that we're fighting for. Fight for my happiness, fight for my health, fight for my family, fight for my success, or there's this eternal struggle that on one hand you can get why we do it, because look at what we've done, right? Look what people have done. We've gone to the moon, right? But at the same time, it doesn't always lead to peace of mind or satisfaction, right? Or a sense of fulfillment or joy or being present, right? It just always leads you out. So that's the stuff that fascinates me, and the stuff that all of my work is designed. Which one of my books you read? But in this latest book, Grow Up, it's designed to get you grounded in something that really matters to you, and you see what it's going to take from you to live that life as a parent, as opposed to perhaps the one you've been living.
I love that. I love that. And you mentioned, you assert that all the parenting books that offer kid-oriented solutions aren't helping. We don't need more tricks, tips, techniques. We need to unlearn, what has been ingrained in us. Right. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So you see, I could really show you, if you have if somebody has 4 children, and I say, these are all the things you should do with your children, right? They're okay. And they methodically did all those things, took all of those actions and did all those things. It will not shift the human being delivering the message. So the parent, the one that you've become, remains unmoved. So even if you give them all those things to do, you'll do them in your way, the way that you would do that. And that's really the thing. It's not like parenting tips are useless. They're great, but they make no difference until you confront who's using them, right? You have to get to who's doing it. And that's really what I wanted this book to be about, to ground someone in the fundamentals of being a parent. What is it to be, right? As opposed to all the things I've ended up with in my life.
I love that. I love it. Such a brilliant point. And I don't think this is probably how important is it to be truthful as a parent? What does truth play in this role?
Yeah. Is it? So I think one of the things you have to really realize is, if you've got little ones, you have to manage who you're communicating with. You can't be truthful to your children, say I'm really suffering right now, I'm having a terrible time of it. You can't say that to your 7-year-old, right? Way to dump on them, So you got to be responsible, and you got to manage. But one of the things that we tend to do is we do this in life in general, but we definitely do it with our children, is we tend to kind of play the role, instead of giving them a little glimpse of what it is to actually be authentic while I'm playing the role, right? And so I give an example in the book, and I talk about when I really broke into this idea of being an authentic father, really with my sons, and being an authentic man with my sons. I have 3 boys, and not the pretense, the kind of stereotypical role model. And by the way, all of those role models are all derived from fear, every one of them. So every stereotypical parenting model that is all just designed for and being passed along by parents who were just terrified of how their children were going to turn out. And so then, you got to play the role. And as many parents will tell you, I'm playing the role, but I'm dying inside. And I say, well, maybe it's time to kind of start this process of ending the pretense. And in the book, I give you a real good sense of what does it look like even to be an authentic parent, right? And being authentic, by the way, is not the bumper sticker statement, be yourself. That is not it, right? When most people are saying be themselves, they're saying, I'm just going to be myself. It usually means be the character you've become. Now, authenticity begins with vulnerability. You can't have authenticity without the truth. Authenticity isn't complaining or giving somebody a piece of your mind. That is not authenticity. That is not, right? That's That's running your complaint, okay? Although people have used it, right? Oh, I'm just being authentic, right? And I say, no. Authenticity begins with telling the truth to yourself. That's where it begins. I tell the truth because that's we'll go back to that kind of earlier thing you said. That is the hardest thing. It's hard to tell yourself the truth because you've been feeding yourself a line for so long that you believe it. Right? I can't. I'm not gonna. They better not. Like whatever it is going on with people internally. Believe them. They're not just. It's not just a frivolous thing. So again, this book, which is coming out next month, is definitely one that will take a dive in. We're going in, for sure.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Yeah, I love that fact that you really explained authenticity. I don't think it's really, I think people do confuse it with complaining, and that is a good point to highlight. It's good observation. Yeah. I think it needs to be more defined and described more. I think there's a lot of confusion with some of these terms, authenticity, awareness, all these things. It's not really being described in a way that people can understand the process or what it looks like, so they, again, going back to interpreting what they think it is. And then we go back to what's familiar and what's comfortable. And then we just, like you said, we just relive the whole loop over again.
Yeah. It's the same with like this whole, we got a lot of it a while back about speaking my truth. I mean, people have just been using that phrase to explain why they lost it. Right? I'm just speaking my truth. Well, no, you need to go your truth is like 3 layers below that outburst. And authenticity is confronting what that is, not what fell out of your mouth, right? So, I had this issue with somebody, and a person who probably should be in a better position, but they talked about how, I talked about parents and be controlling, and they said, and this is a person of authority who said this, yeah, but what do you do if you have controlling parents? And I said, control is an interpretation. Your parents did what they did, you interpreted all of that as control. Yeah, but they did this and they did that and they did that. And I said, yeah, and it still stands. But what you're left with is not what your parents did or didn't do. What you're left with is I was controlled, right? And so then that notion of I was controlled, when you're young, that's imprinted now. That just settles down at the bottom of the pile. And you go off in adult life with, no one will ever control me. No one. Yeah, and you go into a marriage with that. And on the surface, it all looks good. It's all going great. Here we are. 3 years in, 4 years in, 5 years in. Don't tell me what to do. Why you always tell me what to do? Because I'm picking up on all that now. And so people think speaking my truth is, no one's going to tell me what to do. No, your truth is, somewhere in that past of yours, you were left with an experience that you've never resolved for yourself. And you need to get that resolved so that you're free. That's speaking your truth.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's so true. And there's a lot of talk too about reparenting ourselves. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, too late. You're too late. It's, you can't, it's like trying to have, the body you had 30 years ago or 20 years ago. But you gotta realize now, and this is, I think, there is a value in understanding how you went through the spaces as a child and what you came out with and how some of that lives on with you. There is a tremendous value in that, okay? And examining that, seeing that, but not to kind of weigh yourself down, to actually understand, well, how is this shaping me now? right? And how is this still impacting what I do and don't do, right? Then you've got access to something. Then you've got a doorway to something, right? Then you've got a doorway to, oh my gosh, I'm still doing it, right? So there is value in doing that work, but you know, one of the things that you got to be careful you're not doing is having something linger longer than it needs to. And all too often that's what people do. It just becomes the new thing, right? Where quite frankly the story, the narrative, the drama lives on.
I love that. Good point. Is there any closing words, like anything you want to like leave the Happy Being Well audience with about anything, about your book?
Yeah. One of the things that I absolutely insist upon is all the great work you do, the work that really makes the difference and pushes you on and has you produce brilliant results. It's generally the most uncomfortable and sometimes the most painful thing you've ever gone through. But when you go through that and you realize, like, man, why was I hanging on to that? Why didn't I do that work? You know, I could have been free of this 15 years ago or 15 weeks ago or 15 minutes ago. You know, I say to people, the good work, the good stuff is the challenging stuff, and that's the stuff you should seek out.
I love that. I love that. And your book, it gets released September 12th, I believe.
Yeah.
Am I correct? Yeah.
Yeah. It's called Grow Up, Becoming the Parent Your Kids Deserve.
Yeah. And people can get that on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, online, offline, any bookstore really. It's published by Harper One.
Yeah. And I did the audiobook myself.
Oh, the audiobook too.
Yeah.
So
I always do my audiobooks.
And it's in your voice. I love it when authors do it in their voice because it just sounds more, I don't know, more lively, like, you know, like you can actually like listen and you're absorbing the information better. So that's awesome. Love that.
Yeah.
So
you can't beat having Shrek telling you to get your stuff together.
Mm-hmm. And so people can listen on their drive to work. You get the audiobook while you're working out, while you're cleaning the house, while you're washing dishes, cooking. It's really convenient. So Thank you so much, Gary, for being on the Happy Being Well podcast. And this is a fluke, so I will upload this to the Happy Being Well podcast platform so you can still listen on Apple, iTunes, and Spotify, and all the other podcast listening platforms. And in that, I have the links that you can purchase Gary's book, and you can go to Gary's website, learn more about Gary, and I'm sure they can purchase the book on your website as well. Yeah.
For sure.
And your website is?
garyjohnbishop.com.
Okay, perfect. So guys, buy the book. And, you know, we all heard, I mean, F Yourself, I mean, was like literally so popular. It was like everybody was talking about it. It was such a great book. So this book is just going to be just as amazing. So I'm going to be reading the book. I'm looking forward to reading the book. You have such great insights that are fresh and insightful, and you really just go there with people so they can really connect the dots and really see the invisible things in order for them to really get a handle on it and take the action, get inspired, motivated, and really get activated into what they have to do to create the change and stop with all those familiar patterns that we all keep doing. And I love the fact that you brought up, because I've seen it and I always find it funny, you know, that parents either replicate how they were parented or they do the opposite. That's what I've seen amongst people when I observe it. So it's really, yeah. So I think
awesome.
You're one of the first people that I've heard actually say it. So that's awesome, Gary. I think that's why you're so popular, is you're like one of the first people to like pick up things and to bring it to our attention. So thank you so much, Gary, for being amazing and an amazing book author and such an insightful thinker. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Rita. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks. All right.
Thanks.
Have a lovely weekend in London. No, it's a week. Have a lovely week in London.
Well, thank you so
If you learned something new or were inspired to live happy being well, please be sure to subscribe to the Happy Being Well podcast so you don't miss an upcoming episode. Also, please feel free to leave a 5-star review, including what you learned or what inspired you in today's episode. This podcast is presented by happybeingwell.com, your online store for natural wellness products, so you can live happy being well. Order your next all-natural essential oil, all-natural face mask, all-natural bath soap, all-natural deodorant, herbal tea, crystals including crystal home decor and kitchen items, irresistible leggings, and much more at happybeingwell.com. Free shipping on all orders within the USA.